August 29, 1776. Dawn breaks over Brooklyn Heights, and the fog that once saved an army never rolls in. 9,000 Continental soldiers stand pinned against the East River, British warships sealing the only escape route. By noon, General George Washington's army has ceased to exist. The American Revolution dies on a riverbank, 11 months after it began, and the United States is never born. To understand how close this came to being real history, we have to go back to the summer of 1776. The Continental Congress had just declared independence, but General Washington's ragtag army was in serious trouble. After being pushed out of Boston, Washington moved his forces to New York, expecting the British to strike there next. He was right. Congress had gambled everything on independence only 6 weeks earlier, with no navy, no foreign alliance, and no professional army to speak of. In late June, a British fleet under General William Howe and his brother, Admiral Richard Howe, arrived in New York Harbor, the largest amphibious force the world had ever seen assembled in one place. Over 400 ships carried 32,000 soldiers, more than the entire population of Philadelphia at the time. Washington had roughly 19,000 men, many untrained, poorly supplied, and spread across Manhattan and Brooklyn. He made a critical decision to divide his forces and defend both islands at once. It was, by most modern assessments, a mistake he could not afford to make. Washington himself later admitted the choice was forced on him by geography, as much as by judgment, since both Brooklyn and Manhattan had to be held to keep the British fleet from controlling the harbor entirely. Historians still debate whether splitting the army was a fatal error or simply the only option left to a general defending two islands with a fraction of his opponent's numbers. On August 22nd, Howe landed 20,000 troops on the shores of Long Island, and 6 days later, he struck. British and Hessian forces outflanked the American lines through the Jamaica Pass, a route the Continentals had left almost undefended. In real history, Washington's army was routed and driven back to a defensive line at Brooklyn Heights, trapped with its back to the East River. For 2 days, Howe hesitated, choosing to dig siege trenches rather than storm the American position immediately. Some historians call it caution, others call it the costliest delay in British military history. That hesitation was the hinge point of the entire war. It is a difference that begins with weather, not ideology. On the night of August 29th, a dense fog rolled in off the water, and Washington used it to ferry his entire army, 9,000 men, horses, and cannon, across the East River to Manhattan under cover of darkness. By the time the fog lifted, the Americans were gone. 9,000 men had vanished from under the noses of the largest fleet on Earth, and the rebellion lived to fight another day. Now, imagine the fog never comes. Imagine Admiral Howe, growing impatient, orders his warships into the East River 2 days earlier than he did historically, sealing off the crossing before Washington can organize the evacuation. With no escape route and no reinforcements, the Continental Army is trapped exactly where Howe wants it. By the morning of the 30th, British and Hessian troops storm the American works. Washington is wounded and captured during the final collapse of the line. Nearly the entire Continental Army, the only trained fighting force the rebellion possesses, is killed or taken prisoner. Nearly all of the Continental Army's artillery, its gunpowder reserves, and most of its experienced officer corps are lost in a single morning. News of the disaster reaches Philadelphia within a week, and panic spreads through the Continental Congress. Without an army, without its most capable general, the rebellion has no way to continue fighting. Some delegates flee to Baltimore, others quietly begin drafting terms of surrender. The Howe brothers, who had arrived with authority to negotiate as well as fight, offer a conditional pardon to any colony that renounces independence and returns to British rule. One by one, colonial assemblies accept. By early 1777, the rebellion is over in all but a few isolated pockets of resistance in the Carolina backcountry and parts of New England. Washington himself, held prisoner in New York, is shipped to London to stand trial for high treason. Under British law of the era, the sentence for treason is death. Benjamin Franklin, then in France, attempting to secure support the rebellion no longer has an army to use, negotiates asylum instead of returning home. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and dozens of other signers of the Declaration of Independence lived the rest of their lives as fugitives, exiles, or quietly pardoned private citizens, never holding office again. Without a war debt to bankrupt the French crown, the pressures that pushed France toward its own revolution built more slowly across the following decades. The 13 colonies remained part of the British Empire, reorganized in the 1780s into a series of royal dominions modeled on the way Britain would later govern Canada and Australia. There is no War of 1812 because there is no independent United States to fight it. There is no Louisiana Purchase in 1803 because there is no American government to make it. Instead, British and French colonial claims in North America are settled through a series of European treaties. Spain, freed of an assertive American neighbor pressing westward, holds its own North American territories for decades longer than it did in real history, reshaping the entire map west of the Mississippi. Without the American Revolution as a working example, the independence movements that swept Latin America in the early 1800s lose their clearest model of a colony successfully breaking from a European crown, and many unfold slower, later, or differently. Slavery, still legal across the southern dominions, becomes the central political fight of the empire itself, decades before Britain's real history abolition movement gains full strength. Colonial abolitionists, denied the option of separate nationhood, are forced to fight the battle from inside the empire's own parliament in London. By the 1830s, when Britain abolishes slavery throughout its real empire, the pressure from North American colonial representatives, voices that in our history left the empire before that fight was won, helps tip the vote. Immigration patterns shift too, without an independent United States to serve as a symbol of Republican opportunity. Waves of 19th century European migration are redirected toward British North America, Australia, and South America instead. The Dominions slowly win self-government the way Canada did in real history, gradually, through negotiated autonomy rather than armed revolution, until full independence finally arrives sometime in the early 20th century. Without a rival empire on its own continent, Britain enters the 20th century's global conflicts with a deeper reserve of North American manpower, resources, and industry folded directly into its own command, not as an ally, but as its own territory. The balance of naval power shifts permanently too, since the ports of Boston, New York, and Charleston remain Royal Navy bases rather than the foundations of an independent American fleet. Today, in this alternate timeline, there is no United States of America. Instead, the map of North America shows several self-governing dominions, Columbia, Acadia, Carolina, bound together in a commonwealth still nominally led by the British monarch. There is no American Constitution, no Bill of Rights as the world knows it, and no nation whose founding myth is built on successful rebellion against a king. Cities we know today by their American names exist instead as provincial capitals of the Commonwealth, still tied administratively to London. The political vocabulary of the 20th century looks different without the American Revolution as its founding example. The very idea of a republic winning independence by force loses its most famous proof of concept. English remains the dominant language of North America, but the culture is closer to Canada's real history relationship with the Crown, evolutionary, not revolutionary. Even the technology and industry we associate with American innovation developed instead inside a Commonwealth economic system, credited to dominions and crown corporations rather than a single independent nation's mythology of self-made enterprise. And the world's dominant 20th century superpower is not a republic born from rebellion, but an empire that simply never let go. All of this, the collapse of one nation and the survival of an empire, traces back to a single foggy night on the East River that, in our history, actually happened. Washington's escape from Brooklyn wasn't a footnote, it was the hinge the entire future of the world swung on. If you want to see how differently a single battle, a single decision, or a single night can reshape everything that follows, subscribe to Alternative History Lab, where we explore the moments history almost took a different path.